Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1500 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I can for your education and entertainment. Here we have a Slav Defense. I like to start with c6 because it offers a little bit of a different variety of openings depending on what white chooses, but here we just have a normal Slav, which for all of you Caro Kann players, which I know there are a lot of you, me being one myself, the Slav is very similar to the Caro Kann in many ways, except obviously white has the pawn on c4 rather than e4. So one of the big differences is that white doesn't have to commit to taking, pushing, or defending the pawn like you do normally in a Caro. Whereas in a Slav, white can kind of leave the pawn on c4 up for grabs because it's very easy to get it back with something like e3 or e4 and bishop c4. So I don't really like taking the pawn on c4. You definitely can. There's very viable lines with that. There's a lot of theory attached to them, and I don't really like delving too deep into the theory because I can just get out prepared by somebody who just memorizes computer lines, and I don't want to play against a computer. So personally, in this position, I like to play e6, which is known as the semi-slav, which I believe is a little bit more reminiscent of the Caro, or kind of like a French as well. Whereas the difference is obviously that you can't develop the light squared bishop outside of the pawn chain like you normally would. Now, I really like when my opponents play bishop g5 here. We can play knight after d7, and after e3 play knight bd7, and queen to a5, which is known as the Cambridge Springs defense, which I initially learned from Eric Rosen a long time ago, and I've been watching a few videos on it, been playing it myself. I have a few videos on the channel in the Cambridge Springs, which is, like I said, a really fun defense. But my opponent goes g3, which is more Catalan-esque. So I'm not going to capture. The way that I like to play against these Catalan-type setups, or even you could refer to it as like a Reti sort of setup, with the fianchettoed bishop, is I like to just keep this pawn triangle intact, because I don't want to take and allow this diagonal to open up, because if you've played against this kind of structure, you know that light squared bishop can get insanely powerful out of nowhere. So personally, I like to just keep this d-pawn incredibly well defended and try to nullify the effectiveness of this bishop. Now, I'll continue with normal development. What I may do is play b6, bishop b7, and then strike with a move like c5. Because if this diagonal opens up, then I can trade the light squared bishops in lots of cases, which I'd be very happy to do. Because, like I said, this bishop can get very, very powerful. Okay, bishop f4, that's very interesting. So he's willing to double the pawns to exert more control over the e5 square. So let's say take, queen c7, e3. Maybe then I just go b6 and prepare bishop b7. And then maybe we try and strike with a move like c5. I don't know if I've faced this kind of thing. No, I'm sure I have in somewhat similar Slav positions seen this before. And I'm sure you're supposed to take. Because I don't think it's that big a deal if we can't play e5, because we can always play c5 in the future. As I said, there's probably a very good chance I can take here, but then white can play moves like e4, and he's probably going to pick this pawn back up. And if I try and play something like b5, bishop b7, I don't know, this kind of thing just looks so scary, and I want no part in it. So I think b6 just looks very solid, very easy. f5 I don't think is ever really a concern. I could probably just take it. Like I said, we could start with queen c7 with tempo on the pawn, but queen c7 is going nowhere. He may choose to play e3 voluntarily anyway, so I don't really think we need to egg him on, particularly because if queen c7 is played and we want to play c5 in the future, then maybe knight to b5 can come with tempo. Okay, knight to e5, interesting. So what happens if we take? So I assume he takes back with the f pawn. He could take back with the d pawn. But I think it makes more sense to take with the f pawn. So let's say knight takes, f takes, knight d7, maybe e4, bishop b7. Maybe we just start with bishop b7 then. Because I'm going to have to play bishop b7 at some point anyway, and obviously that defends the c6 pawn. I suppose after g takes f4, if I went queen c7, maybe he could have played knight to e5 in that position? Maybe that was his plan, in which case we'd probably just get a very similar position to what we have now, except my queen would be on c7. Okay, queen c2. Interesting. So c5 is something that should be considered, but probably not just yet. Again, the question arises, should I take the knight? Knight takes, f takes, knight d7. C5 can't be played. Or maybe it can? Maybe c5 is the idea. So what if I go c5 immediately? Take. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. Take. Should I prepare with rook c8? Or should I just go c5? Is this annoying? I don't know. I just feel like it's the wrong thing to take the knight, just because my knight gets kicked out of f6, because one of the pawns will take back with tempo. Really interesting position. What happens if c5? Well, we are threatening to take this pawn, but what if he just plays rook after d1? For example. I can't do this because I lose my bishop, right? So here. Queen c7? Well, then I just get hit with knight to b5. Right? So, not convinced. But if I go take and knight d7, I mean, e4 could be on the way. I don't think e4 is that big a deal. I'm slightly more concerned about c5 and something like take, knight takes, and knight takes d5. I don't know. That looks kind of concerning. And then if I get left with a c6 pawn, just not able to move forward, then I could be in a bit of trouble. Because my bishop will be completely useless. Although, maybe I can put it on a6, though. So maybe it's okay. Although, I don't know, e4 could be a problem. It's very interesting. Very interesting position. And I've got a bit of time to think about it as well. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. What else can I do? What else can I do other than taking or pushing c5? I could play a6, preemptively stopping any knight b5 ideas. That's viable. And then maybe I prepare queen c7. So let's say a6, rook after d1, queen to c7, preparing c5 ideas. I don't know, like rook after d8, rook a c8. That looks interesting. Ooh, wait, there could be some tactics, though, where the c file gets opened if my queen is on c7, and then there's, like, knight takes. Oh, no, but the queen is currently hanging, so that's okay. But if the queen is defended, then after queen takes queen, knight f6 comes with check, and after knight takes and something like rook takes, if he puts a rook on c1, I could be down a pawn in those lines. So I've got to be aware of that. So maybe I start with queen c7. Maybe I start with queen c7, and then I look to play rook a c8 quickly, so that if any knight takes shenanigans, I can take back. If like pawn take, knight take, something like bishop takes, and my queen would be defended, I don't know. b3. Okay, not a move I was expecting, to be honest, or a move that I'm particularly concerned with. Let's play rook ac8. I think that's the logical continuation. I want to go a6 and I think c5, because in these Slav positions, normally to break in the center, you either want to play e5 or c5. Clearly, e5 is not something that we can play, because white has a complete bind on the e5 square, so c5 is going to be our plan of action, most likely. Okay, I think a6 to stop knight b5 ideas, which would be very annoying. If a5... I think just c5 should be okay. And I mean, the d4 pawn is currently undefended, so he would have to respond to that. And also our bishop is protected, so let's say, yeah, he goes for it. I think we just push. I think that's okay. And we achieve the c5 pawn break, which is the big idea in this position. I'm not overly concerned about this, I don't think. I think it's a big deal. I'm surprised my opponent hasn't been trying to play for e4, to be honest. Oh, wait, have I messed up? No, I think I take with a knight. If I take with a queen, I could have a few issues with defending the d5 pawn, maybe, after something like... Well, no, because this is hanging, though. So let's say queen takes, knight takes, pawn takes. I can just take here. So that's okay. Let's take with the queen. And if knight to a5... Queen b4 looks okay. Bishop's defended. This is defended. I don't see an issue with this. The queen can't be attacked by anything. If knight takes c5, knight takes c5. Something like this. Rook takes. Knight back to f3. That looked really weird. Can't I just take on c4? Opening up my bishop, now that he's blocked his own bishop as well. Maybe I'm setting these ideas up for him. Well, no, but I can always throw in bishop to e4. That was what I was thinking. So let's say b takes c4, bishop to e4, which attacks the queen and also stops any rook b1 ideas. And then maybe I can take on d4 and have attacks on the c4 pawn. Okay. I'm still not convinced, though. Still not convinced. I think I can just trade. And then take. And I'm just up a pawn, no? This is kind of the big idea of the Slav defense, like I was saying, is that you break in the center at some point. I mean, I suppose maybe he has knight to... Oh, no, knight b2 just hangs the knight. Well, then I can take on f4, though. What's going on? Now I'm up 2 pawns. So if I lose the a pawn, I still have good winning chances, because I have a majority on the king side. What I have to make sure I do is I don't get too passive when I'm defending this pawn. I think that's a caveat to all of this. I think I want to attack the knight rather than defend the pawn. So, like, I don't want to play a move like rook to a8, which is just super passive, just sitting behind the pawn. Now, if this pawn was on a3, then maybe I play rook to a8, because, you know, the pawn is a big asset. But for now, I consider it more of a weakness than an asset. Okay, knight c5 looks pretty nice. I do allow knight to e5, though. Maybe I can give a check. Does that do anything? Don't know. Check. King f1. Do I achieve anything? This is still under attack. Knight c5. Knight e5 comes with tempo on my rook, but I do have rook h4 going after this. What about... Oh, why am I not considering just doubling up? Obviously, that's the move. Yeah, of course that's the move. And let's say rook a6, rook c3, rook c3, rook c3. There is no no rook to a8 because I always have knight to f8. And even if this knight had a way of attacking my knight on f8, I'd always have knight 6 to d7 to defend. Yeah, this is completely lost. Why is he doing this? There is no... Yeah, there's no chance for white anymore. He's completely lost. I think I just play a move like h6 and give my king some breathing room, and I'm just up a piece and a pawn. I don't really understand why he did that. It's a very strange decision. And I can always put this knight on f8 if I want, if it becomes a problem to defend. Yeah, that's really cool. Like, the position opened up and we just were on the better end of all the trades. Like, white had a good amount of pressure. I'd say in the... What sort of position? I don't know, like this position... No, not this position. This position, I thought white had a lot of pressure. But like I said, in these positions, you break with e5 or c5 typically. And here c5 was clearly the break. And yeah, everything just opened up in our favour, won a couple pawns, and then he gave me a knight, which was lovely of him. But okay, let's make sure we convert this properly. Knight to e5, attacking f7, so we should block that. I wouldn't do this one because maybe he can double up on the back rank, which could be annoying, so I'd rather block with the rook on the third rank, so I maintain control of both of my back ranks, as in the 8th rank and the 7th rank. And then I can get to work with getting rid of this knight once this rook has gone away. And if he takes and tries to play rook to d8, I'm not concerned at all, really, because this knight has no way of adding more pressure. So I could probably, I don't know, just play a move like knight to d7, and like knight takes, rook takes, and knight takes, and I trade everything. So now I'm going to attack the knight, now that there is pressure relieved on f7. I could play a move like knight g6, but I'd prefer to do this because, I don't know, maybe I can... Oh no, I'm not losing the e6 pawn. This rook's on the d file. Knight d5 looks very strong, though, with double threats of e3 check and knight takes f4 check. And if a move like king to f3, trying to stop both things, I can probably just play rook to c3 check. Or he can just give me the pawn, and then I'll get the knight, which is very kind of him. This is a very strange game of chess, I will say. Very strange game, because my opponent played really, really well in the opening, I think. I've seen this bishop f4, and g takes f4 idea before. I assume it's decent, because I've seen people play it. Okay, I'm not really sure why he's not advancing to counterattack, but that's a free knight. Again, thank you. With pressure on e2, so this should be a relatively easy cleanup now, because white has no pressure anymore. And yeah, he resigns. One thing I will say is when you're in these positions where you're up a good amount of material, don't just sit back and defend. Like, if you can help it, try to keep putting pressure on and attacking. I know we're up a full piece, so you may be tempted to just curl up into a defensive ball, and that might be fine, but I think it's easier to take the fight to your opponent once you've dealt with your own potential weaknesses. Anyways, that was a pretty solid win. Let's jump into the analysis and see what the computer has to say. Okay, so I had 91.1% accuracy, and my opponent had 81.7%. It looks like we had a very good game, but there was one point at which we blundered, but my opponent did not capitalize. So it'll be interesting to see where that is. But let's jump into it. So, as I said, I like to start with c6 on move 1 for a variety of reasons. One being that a lot of people transpose into the Caro. Another being that I can meet the London with queen b6, which I have dubbed the Centurion system. But my opponent went c4, so we go d5, just transposing into a normal Slav. Knight to f3, knight to f6, knight c3, e6. As I said, bishop to g5 is a line that I really enjoy. Knight bd7, e3, and queen to a5 is the Cambridge Springs defense, which I do have a few videos on my channel if you're interested. But my opponent went g3, which is like a Catalan sort of setup. And like I said, the computer will often want you to take on c4. It says that my move, bishop d6, sorry, is plus 0.3, and taking is zeros. But I don't want to have to play this kind of position because I simply don't understand it. Like, this to me looks terrifying. So instead, I just go bishop d6, bishop g2, castles, knight bd7, and bishop f4 is considered a mistake, and taking is the best move by far. I didn't really see another option, to be honest. I mean, the second best move is bishop b8, and I mean, this just seems a little bit silly. So takes, and we just have to concede the fact that white will have a good bind over e5 and play around it. Here the computer again wants me to take on c4, and after knight e5, fe5, knight d5. I saw something similar to this, but I don't know, I just don't understand these positions where you take on c4 and try to hold on to the pawn. I don't feel comfortable in them. I have tried in the past, and I just hate it so much. So instead, I played b6, which is a viable move. It's just considered inaccurate because I'm not taking the quote-unquote free pawn. Knight e5. Computer actually likes taking. And I was considering knight d7, but yeah, the computer hates this, which is why I rejected it. It wants knight g4, which I briefly considered with ideas of something like queen to h4, but I thought that h3 just stops everything, so it's just pointless. But the engine thinks the knight can go back to h6, and then, let's say, you play a nothing move. Then it wants this. Okay, b3. Oh, it wants to open up with f6. That I didn't consider. That's interesting. But I went bishop b7, which is actually the best move. Queen c2. Again, the computer likes taking and wants to play knight g4. But as I said, I was considering knight d7, which the engine just hates. So queen c7, b3. Again, I was confused by that. I thought that he would play something like rook to c1, which is apparently not a good move, but okay. b3, rook a c8, a4, which again really confused me, this a4 move. I thought he was just going to play a move like e3, which is a bit better, but the best move is rook f to d1, which I thought was also a very normal looking move. But he goes a4, I go a6. Apparently c5 can be played immediately, but I was concerned about knight b5. But computer says, well, just go queen b8 and there's no issues, which, yeah, I suppose we're going to kick it out anyway. I think I was more so looking at things like queen d8 and then like I'm losing a pawn, and that's pretty bad. So I just go a6, a5, c5, ab6, queen b6. Computer prefers knight b6. But queen b6 is also fine. Knight a4. Queen b4 is the blunder. Oh, can you spot why this is a blunder? Can you spot it? Pause the video, try and find it. This is quite interesting. It's knight d3. The backwards knight move, which is often the hardest moves to find in chess. Attacking the queen. My queen only has one safe square, and then knight c5 with a discovery on my queen. After a move like this, then like knight b7, queen b7, and I'm only down a pawn, but I've just lost my bishop. And there's pressure here, the pawns are potentially rolling. It's not great. But my opponent missed it. He went knight to f3, which absolutely baffled me. Even if he wasn't going to play this, I thought he might play something like knight c5. And something like knight c5, dc5, queen c5. I was expecting something like this. With the idea being that I can't take because my bishop hangs, right? But he went knight f3, which gave me the perfect opportunity to open up. Now, the computer prefers cd4, which I don't understand, because I thought he could play knight d4. Apparently not. Take. Why is this so good for me? Oh, there's just a double attack, which I missed. Okay. Well, dc4 is still good. Queen c4. I thought after bc4 we can take on f3 and then just take on d4 with an attack on c4, and here we are basically just winning. If white tries to defend, computer says queen d6 with an attack on the f4 pawn. Let's say queen d2 defending. Rook f to d8. That's very patient. Let's say rook a b1. Yeah, it's coming up with some weird moves, but knight c5 looks natural. Rook b6, queen c7. And I suppose c4 is just very weak. Let's say knight c5, rook here. Oh, we're not supposed to. Oh, sorry, the rook is hanging. My bad. But my opponent took with the queen, which is better. Queen takes, b takes, c takes, knight takes, bishop takes, king takes, rook c4. And here, for the life of me, I could not understand why my opponent didn't play e3, defending the knight. And here we still have a bit of a game. I have the cool move knight d5, where if my opponent is a little bit lazy, then he gets hit with knight takes f4, e takes f4, and rook takes d4. This also comes with check. But it just goes knight f3. And I mean, e3, don't get me wrong, black is the only side that can win this. But I'm only up one pawn, and the pawn is, you know, kind of difficult to defend. Again, like I said, I don't want to play moves like rook a8. Like, look at the evaluation. It's currently minus 0.4. If I play rook a8, it goes down to, like, minus 0.3. Because... or minus 0.2 even. Because my rook is just so passive. But knight f3, I, of course, take. Knight c3, I go rook c4, rook fc1, rook fc8. And then he just gives me the knight. I thought he was going to play knight to a2. And then I have the option to just trade everything, which I was going to happily do. Because up 2 pawns in a knight endgame should be completely winning with the outside passer in particular. But rook d1 just gives me the knight. And then I just give my king luft. I drop the knight back, defend f7, attack the knight. f4, knight d5, and then rook a3, knight f4. I couldn't understand why he didn't play king f3 to at least get this. I don't know. It's still losing, but no, he just gives me the knight for free and then resigns. So, a very interesting game. My opponent kind of self-destructed once we went up a pawn, but up one pawn really wasn't the end of the world for white. I still would have backed myself to win that position. Up the pawn after... what position? After rook takes c4 and e3. I still would have backed myself to win this, but it would have been more of a fight, because I can't just willy-nilly trade pieces. Like, I can't play a move like knight c5. This is just a complete draw, right? Because a6 is so weak. Again, like knight d5, I don't know, king f3 is interesting, rook b8. I have to be nice and active here, but it is difficult. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to see another very interesting game in the Slav Defense, then check out the video up here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.